weeks ago, after quite a few conversations, with the idea to bring to Scappoose this kind of an activity, a debate on the Iraq War, came about, and tonight I hope that we'll hear some things and learn some things and come away better informed. I think an informed citizenry in our republic is the most powerful thing you can have. And so this is going to be good. And of course we do have to thank Professor James DeYoung, who's traveled all the way from Clackamas, and in the same neighborhood over in Clackamas, David Brownlow. I'm going to let these gentlemen introduce themselves shortly, but first let's open with a word of prayer. Ben Snodgrass.
Well, thank you, Father. Father, in your word it says to lift our voices for understanding, that we can be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And I ask that you would lead us and guide us tonight, and that we would learn good things. And we want to thank you for this time. In the name of Jesus. Amen.
Okay. What we have planned for a way of conducting a debate tonight is that each one of our speakers will make an opening statement. I think a generous time of 7 minutes each, and after that there will be 2 opportunities for each of them, 2 minutes each, to counter or challenge the other person's statements, or just make one of their own, whatever they wish to say, ask a question of the other. And after those 2 back and forths, with 2 minutes each for them, there will be some questions that have been submitted, and Carrie Kaysen has those. I'll ask her to just at random pick out from your basket, and then our 2 men will have an opportunity with 2 minutes each, again, to answer those. And then finally there'll be a closing statement of 3 minutes each. Our timekeeper tonight is Ray Biggs. Ray, we want to hold your hand up. And James and David, please keep an eye on Ray. He's got a yellow card that he'll hold up when there's 15 seconds to go, and a red when the time has expired. And we don't ask you to stop in mid-sentence or anything. Just come to a conclusion as quickly as you can, and we'll try to stay orderly. I'm going to ask if folks would hold back from clapping or any other loud kind of expression that you really like what either David or James have said, or disagree with what they've said. If we can avoid that, I think the evening will be better. It's a debate, not a war, right? And then after a short break, we're going to give everyone here, you folks who've come out tonight, who have your own thoughts and questions, an opportunity, 1 minute each, to make a statement and or ask a question of David Brownlow or James DeYoung, and then they would have 30 seconds, if a question's asked of them, to respond. And we're not going to cut the night off as long as there's somebody here who has something they want to say. That being said, really glad you all came out. I'm going to ask David and James to, if they would, introduce themselves in a biographical way as much as they want to, so that we can get to know them a little bit as they begin speaking. And so let's just welcome them. And for order of speaking, Michael, you must have a coin in your pocket. You want to get ready to flip one? And Professor DeYoung, do you want to call heads or tails?
All right. Heads. Heads? You first? Okay.
or do you wish to go first? I'll go first. Okay. All right, then. Timekeeper, you know how it's going to go, right?
Is this the 7 minutes?
7 minutes.
Are we to do the intro about ourselves first, though,
Yes.
outside of the 7 minutes? Or
Okay, let's do that, yes. Let's not take any precious time from the issue. Go ahead, James DeYoung, introduce yourself, and David after that.
Okay. I grew up on a farm in Illinois and came west to teach at Multnomah School of the Bible in 1971. I think that my first awareness of political matters came about when I was in college. This will date me a little bit, but I remember that my first involvement in a campaign of sorts, at least, was in the Barry Goldwater campaign for president back in the past. When I was at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, I became aware of how significant the communist threat was to the United States. There was a bookstore, or several bookstores in downtown Chicago, and I frequented them because I wanted to find out what they had to say about our country. And then I began reading about communism and wrote some articles for our student newspaper about that. Went on to seminary, graduated from there, came to Portland, as I said, in 1971, then went to Western Seminary in 1975 and have been there ever since, teaching courses in New Testament and Greek. But my interest in political matters has continued alongside of my other interests because I think it's very important for a Christian to know about the state. Why did God ordain the state? What is the purpose of the state? And how should involvement in the state occur? And how does one take a proper place in understanding his role in the state? In addition to the fact that we all pay taxes, I think every Christian ought to be involved in some way in regards to political matters, as we would call them, beyond voting, beyond paying taxes. And so I've kept up an interest in that over all of these years. And I feel that the issue that we're facing tonight is part of that larger matter of Christian citizenship. So how do we fulfill our obligations as people living in a society, and particularly right now when we're engaged in a significant conflict abroad that concerns all of us, perhaps very deeply. So I appreciate your coming tonight, and I hope it'll be beneficial to all of us.
My name is David Brownlow. I live in Damascus, not too far from James, actually, as fate would have it. I was going to an engineering school in the late 70s, and I came to a place where I was seeking, and in my senior year of college, I came to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, and I'd gone from a very rebellious frat guy to radically different. And very shortly after I came to Christ, I had a realization. Abortion to me, I'd never been involved with one, but to me was like a traffic ticket. It was a fine you might get for doing something wrong, and that was a joke in my group. Well, immediately upon getting saved, I had a realization for the child in the womb that I couldn't explain. It was just overwhelming. And I was taking a senior year speech class, and my final speech I gave on the life issue. And that pretty much freaked everybody out, because in '79, that wasn't an issue you talked about. It was ignored. So that started my political career, and I've since then, 25, 27 years or so, pro-life activism, fighting legalized child killing at the clinic level and politically, and felt like I got, over the years, led down a path that the Republicans had led us down, which they were the pro-life party, and that was disillusioned. So I joined the Constitution Party back in 2002, I guess it was. Ran for Congress three times, and learned a lot about debating. Had a chance to debate Gordon Smith. It was fascinating times. The war, to me, is a continuation, in my mind, of the life issue. If it's wrong to kill an innocent child in the womb, then Why can we blow up an Iraqi kid in his home? So I look at it as if we respect life, we respect life. So I believe, as Jim does, that the political part of us is every bit of our Christian person, because we live in the world around us and we are absolutely affected by what happens in our world. So I've been attempting to influence that, and we began a group. I have a son in Iraq right now. My son is south of Baghdad in a desperate situation. But my wife and I started a group with some friends of ours called Believers Against the War. We saw a real lack of, I want to say, calm thought from Christians about the war. Is it biblical? Is it right? And so that was our perspective. And tonight, that's the agenda, and I appreciate the invite very much.
Sounds like it's going to be pretty interesting already. Some folks have come in that I don't think received a copy of a handout, which includes something called the Principles of the Just War. And this is something that early on, after the Lord Jesus Christ was crucified, the resurrection, and followers began to, just as we do, live lives in the midst of the nations, and concerns regarding war caused the development from, like I say, early on, 250 years AD up till now. There's been a refinement of these principles, and I think most of you will be very interested to take a look at them. And Lars, is Lars Ekstrom here? Okay, somebody else who can hand these out to anybody who doesn't have one. We appreciate it. Could you do that? Thank you. And then I think now we're ready to begin. And James, you want to, you're going to go first?
Yes.
Okay. Timekeeper?
To be here tonight, and I appreciate the invitation from Bob Ekstrom to speak on this issue. I know that it is an issue that is seriously considered and thought about and debated in American society right now. And I appreciate the fact that so many of you have turned out tonight, and so many children that are here as well. That's quite remarkable. You could be doing other things tonight, and equally important things perhaps, but you've taken the opportunity to be here and to consider this issue, which is confronting American society in significant ways. My hope is that as we come to this issue tonight, that we will address it with serious and deliberate thinking, considered thinking, rather than emotive matters. I'm sure that all of us, when we come to this issue, come to it with all kinds of different backgrounds. We come to it with different convictions. We come to it with different affiliations with political parties, perhaps, or non-affiliation with parties. Different involvement personally. Dave has referred to his own family's involvement in the war. We come to it with different degrees of education. We come to it with different faith backgrounds. All of these things inform our understanding and our opinions about the war. I guess Americans have never been lacking in opinions about such a significant issue as that of war in our history. We're also significantly influenced by media reporting. And unfortunately, in my view, that has not been fair or equal or honest in regards to the reporting of the war and the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan in particular. We come to this issue with the broad backgrounds of either liberalism or conservatism or all kinds of shades in between. So no doubt all of us have all kinds of baggage and all kinds of background and influences that are instructing us and guiding our thinking. I speak tonight in defense of the just war criteria that ought to be applied to all wars that America engages in, and basically the just war criteria have become somewhat universally embraced. As Bob referred earlier, this is a a theory or just war criteria go all the way back to perhaps as early as 1,500 years before the coming of Christ. There are certain things that are found in the Old Testament in the Mosaic legislation that pertain to just war. And then the church fathers after the time of Christ, such as Augustine and Ambrose, deliberated upon this issue. And ever since then, Christians have been considering this matter, adding to criteria, thinking about the criteria, so that as Christians become influential in a particular state, they would want that state to observe just war criteria. So I speak tonight in defense of the just war criteria, and I believe that the application of those criteria to our conflicts in Afghanistan and in Iraq are applicable, and that these are just war wars. That is, these conflicts meet just war criteria. I believe that just war criteria reinforce biblical teaching concerning the role of the state. The Apostle Paul gives us very significant information about this in Romans 13, 1 Timothy 2, 1 and 2, and a few other passages. There is writing in 1 Peter chapter 2. And in addition to these epistles, we have the instruction of Jesus himself concerning the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, chapters 5 through 7. We also have his instruction about the role of Caesar in Matthew 22. So all of this information is pertinent to a Christian, and I come to this issue as a Christian seeking to understand biblical agreement with just war criteria. Just war criteria basically is one major view that Christians have taken. The other major view concerning war is what is called the pacifist position. This position teaches that the Sermon on the Mount provides ethics and moral standing to determine how a government should wage war, as well as personal information about how to treat your neighbor. The pacifist view said that government should not resist evil, and that the Sermon on the Mount should guide governments as well as personal individuals. It means, therefore, that no Christian should participate in war of any form and engage in any kind of military service. It would mean that war, especially nuclear war, must be avoided at all costs, and unilateral disarmament must be governmental policy. Non-resistance and non-violence should be both personal and state policy, so that the same ethical standards that guide individual behavior ought to guide the state. That's the pacifist view. And that's the first major view that Christians have embraced through the ages. The other major view is just war criteria. And this goes all the way back, as I said, to some of the teaching in the New Testament and in early church fathers, and has been modified through the generations ever since. There are various options in just war positions. You can take a non-resistant view, that is, the right of government can resist evil, but not the individual. There's a nuclear pacifist view that teaches that doing justice in the earth as far as war is concerned is okay in every other respect, but not in exercising nuclear weapons and involving them. There's the preventive war idea within just war theory, saying that people can embark upon a preemptive strike to prevent some kind of judgment taking place, so that preventing evil would allow that to take place. But the traditional just war view doesn't go quite as far as all of these, as particularly the preventive war position. And so I want to, in the evening tonight, show how those criteria, the 7 or 8 that Bob has distributed on this sheet of paper, apply to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I come to this war issue, and I'll differentiate for now Afghanistan and Iraq. I believe they both fall in the same category, but I'm speaking tonight particularly about Iraq, as it's such an egregious assault well, it's immoral, it's ungodly, and it's unconstitutional. And I believe as Christians we should look at the moral and the godly portion, but I think as Americans, and I think I agree with Jim, that we should be involved in politics. And the law of our land is the U.S. Constitution. And without question, this war is against that, and I believe the Bible. Now, rather than attempt a biblical sparring match with a PhD in philosophy, I thought I would point a few things out the Bible doesn't say about war. The lack of clarity with what's happening in Iraq is, I think, a big symptom. When God sent people on wars in the Bible, and this is Old Testament, the New Testament is largely silent from a Christian perspective on launching wars, but Old Testament, is, as we know, is full of warfare. But did God ever send people to war on false pretenses or using falsehoods to get them there? And I submit no. You go through the wars of the Bible, and God was clear. Moses, this is to Joshua. Moses, my servant, is dead, it says in Joshua 1. Now therefore arise, go over to Jordan, you and the people, to the land which I have given you, and every place the sole of your foot will tread upon I have given you. There was no mixed words there. There wasn't euphemisms about terror. It was just, go take it, it's yours. And we found in this war here from the beginning. And I came out against this war very early on, back in 2002, when the vote first occurred in the Congress, which I believe was an unconstitutional vote. But it was, every story that came out has now been disproven. And I don't see any of God's hand on a war that was started off of so many things that ended up being false. I don't believe that would be God's way to leave a trail, to leave his handprints on a war. Another thing is we've done is we have twisted preemption to an absurd length. And I'll call it the do unto others before they have a chance to do unto you mentality. We took a group of people in Iraq who hadn't attacked us, hadn't threatened to attack us. They weren't involved in a 9/11 attack or whatever that was. And Jesus said just the opposite. I mean, when he spoke to us, and his, the gospel is a book of love and not of hate. And as opposed to doing to others what they, or in our case, before they do to you, he said, love them, bless them, and do good to those who hate you, and pray for them who persecute you. And so I think from just a perspective of a Christ-like nature of God's people, we should have pity on the Iraqi people and look at their country now and see what's happened as a result of our invasion. We've taken it one step further than one of the things that's not lacking in this war is propaganda and slogans from our government. There's numerous ones, and you've heard many of them. One of the ones that personally offends me the most is support our troops. As if supporting our troops is leaving them stranded in an Iraqi shooting gallery to become targets. That's not support. But one of the ones that I think is the most immoral is the one that says it's better to fight them over there than over here. If we go to the logic of that, we say, we've now admitted freely, and President Bush on down says Iraq was not involved in our al-Qaeda dispute, our 9/11 dispute, and no planned attacks, no nuclear, no anything. But now we're saying we want to fight them, whoever they are, over in Iraq, an uninvolved country, hoping to lure people, theoretically, to Iraq to fight us there than here. That is the most immoral, despicable thought I can think of. To say we're too afraid to fight our own battle, we're going to drag an uninvolved country into our battle to fight somebody else there. It's unbelievable. And I think we haven't had a chance often to sit down and just walk through these silly little slogans and take them apart. And all the slogans we hear taken apart are nonsensical at the core. To this day, from a constitutional standpoint, I will briefly read you what the Congress authorized. This is the printout of the bill that was passed in October of 2002, which supposedly launched this war. There were only two things that our government, our Congress, wrongly and unconstitutionally, but authorized, and it was the president was authorized to use force against Iraq for just two things. Number one, to defend the national security of the the United States against the continuing threat posed by Iraq. That's one. Two, enforce all relevant UN resolutions regarding Iraq. Now, when President Bush said in the aircraft carrier, the big banner, mission accomplished, he was correct. That mission that he was given by Congress, defend the security of the United States, enforce all relevant UN resolutions, which would mean the WMD and the nuclear things, those were met right then. When he was on, before we went, they were met, but on the aircraft carrier, we accomplished that mission. It was gone. And in our rule of law, the Constitution would self-destruct that authorization. It was unauthorized now. It was done. The mission was accomplished. Well, they realized the mission was on false pretenses, and then the tales begin to really get spun. What is the mission? You've heard them all. We've gone to, we're going to free the Iraqi people from an evil dictator. Then it got into, we're going to free the Middle East and freedom and democracy, and that's how we're going to fight the war on terror. And the latest one, which I find to be completely bizarre, is now we're going to create a democracy in Iraq so they can defend themselves and self-govern. And I'm like, where did that come from? So we have taken now the rule of law that we should all be cherishing. I mean, we have a constitution that lays out precise, concise congressional authorizations, and the Congress is entirely responsible for running, funding, regulating the Army, declaring war, and therefore they can declare when it's over. Now we're in the middle of a debate over who runs the Army. Well, I say to you, the people run the Army. We do, through our Congress. And it's not the President or the generals. And we have way stepped out of bounds on the declaration, the running, and now the ending of the war as well.
So at this point, and thank you, gentlemen, we have the opportunity, and Mr. DeYoung, you go first, to make a statement regarding anything David said, or ask him a question or both, but 2 minutes for that, and then David, then James again, and then David, and then we'll do something slightly different with questions that carry in.
I think what I'd like to do in the 2 minutes that are mine at this point is go on and clarify the just war criteria, and that will indirectly address some of the concerns that Dave has had. The number one criteria is just cause. Is there a justified reason for a state to go to war? I believe that that case can be made for Iraq and Afghanistan in light of 9/11 and the commitment of Al-Qaeda to bring terror to America. The second criteria is a just intent. That is, the intent should be to restore peace and to protect the innocent. And I believe that that is why we went to Iraq and to Afghanistan. Third, there ought to be a criteria of a formal declaration of war by an authorized body. And I believe that the declaration that Congress did make covers our engagement today. There ought to be limited objectives. We aren't there to totally destroy the society. There ought to be proportionate means. We don't overwhelm the enemy in the sense of unlimited warfare. Some of you perhaps read or have read and heard about, and I don't know if there's anybody old enough here tonight to be able to have been engaged in World War II, but that became a war of unconditional surrender. And when we started out carefully avoiding attacking and making civilians the target of our attacks, that soon gave way to unlimited warfare. And that's the kind of thing that the criterion would prohibit, if at all possible. Another criterion is non-combatant immunity. A just war would not allow the targeting of civilians in conflict. And I believe that the United States Army or our military had the greatest record in the world for seeking to strive to accomplish that criterion. And then the last criterion is last resort. You go to war only as a matter of last resort.
I'm disappointed to hear 9/11 and Al-Qaeda, frankly, mentioned, because as we know, 9/11, well, we don't know what happened in 9/11, I think, but certainly it wasn't Iraq. it wasn't, and Al-Qaeda wasn't in Iraq until in maybe small numbers. And this is now CIA admissions that any Al-Qaeda that's in Iraq today was brought there due to our invasion. They were looking for a fight. So I guess I would have to say that to be tying 9/11 and the war on terror. Now, if the war on terror is against all brown-skinned people who have oil that are Muslims, then I say that's fine. Say that, but say it like that, and we can't pretend that's not the case, because if there was no oil in Iraq, okay, we wouldn't be there today, I can tell you that. Darfur, 500 miles to the south, is just getting decimated. No oil, no concern. So I think that's disingenuous to mention 9/11 in the same breath as Iraq, because even George Bush has finally admitted that there's nothing to do with 9/11 in Iraq. Protecting the innocent, I would say culturally, we've now killed 50 million unborn American children. Our country has a horrific record of protecting the innocent. And I don't think we have any right to judge any other country. In fact, if you didn't know this, abortion was illegal in Iraq before we got there. I'm sure quite soon it will make that legal in Iraq. So we do not protect innocent life. My dad flew on B-17 bombers, tail gunner in World War II. As Jim said, that was a mass killing. His planes, they dropped napalm on cities. And so our history is not one of protecting innocent life. And non-combatants, we're at 60,000, maybe 100,000 Iraqis. What we've unleashed, the civil war now, with the car bombings, etc., market bombings, we can escape blame if we want to, but it's a direct result of our recklessness as we invaded a country who didn't attack us. And nothing good can come out of that.
Mr. DeYoung? Mr. DeYoung, 2 minutes.
I've had 2 minutes. Do you want me to go again?
Sure.
Oh, okay. When we ask how did we get where we are today in Iraq and in Afghanistan, there are all kinds of considerations. The American people have a toleration for war if they perceive that we are winning the war and we are duly engaged there in a just manner. I think that part of the problem of current policy and current discussion in American life is due to the misrepresentation of the media concerning what is going on in Iraq. If every night becomes a reporting of how many civilians have been killed by car bombs, and ever so often, every other day or so, an American soldier has been killed, and nothing else is ever said about the war, about how we are rebuilding that country, how that the army, the Iraqi army and the Iraqi police are increasing in their ability to take over for us when we go. And if we say nothing about all of those things, to me it is a criminal reporting on the part of the media. It is a distortion that amounts to outright lie and fabrication. And I lay a heavy blame at the feet of the media who never report our successes and our triumphs. Do you know that it wasn't until January of 1944 that the American media showed pictures of the first American soldiers, GIs, killed in World War II? That's 2 years and a month or two from the beginning of the war. If we would have that kind of restraint here, I think public opinion would be significantly different.
I agree with both points that Jim makes for different reasons. He made a statement, I'll reword, we're happy as long as we're winning. The people like war if we're winning and it's fun. That's unfortunate. That says some very disturbing things about our society. But I can assure you, 4 years ago, speaking out against the war in writings and in political campaigns, and the right-wing conservatism, there weren't many friends looking for my message, okay? It was very quiet. No longer is that the case. So I think that my my hope is that this can teach us as Christians and as Americans to think. Don't listen to in fact, the media, I agree with your media, flip side though, the media in the run-up to this war did not do their homework. Those of us involved in political campaigns, we looked at what we could see on the evidence of this warfare in late '02, when after the vote kind of surprised me when it happened. I was in the middle of a congressional campaign and didn't really think much about it, but the vote that authorized this war in October caught us by surprise, and we began to research it. And I kept asking the question to those around, are you seeing this evidence of nuclear and WMD stockpiles and sarin gases? And we always suspected they know something we don't know. There's a secret batch of information that they're not telling us yet. And then they'd ask that question, no, there's no, what you know is out in the media, we've given you all the information. I remember thinking, no, I don't see this. The inspector people were allowed to go back in there, and so the media didn't ask the hard questions. The American people didn't ask the hard questions, and we were fooled through falsities and outright lies to believing that we were under an imminent threat. Even to specifics, there was going to be a fleet of boats that were going to launch WMD Spring drones against the East Coast, and that was delivered to the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. These were the things that happened, and because the media played along to get along, and the American people, God's people, refused to hold our government accountable, we're in the mess we're in today.
All right, well, we have some questions. And Carrie, Casey, you've got a basket there, and we're always trusting you to pick them up by random.
Okay.
And
Is it both ask a question?
yes, and I maybe didn't make it plain enough at first, but you'll each have 2 minutes to answer the question.
Okay.
And of course, you can take off on something else. But the question is the question. And Carrie, what's the first one?
If America pulls out now, our international reputation will be greatly diminished for preemptive interventionism, giving encouragement to terrorist groups everywhere. How could we let this happen?
Same order again as we've been going? What was the last part of the question? Was there a question at the end of that question again?
How could we let this happen?
How could we let what
If
happen?
America pulls out, our international reputation will be greatly diminished for preemptive interventionism, giving encouragement to terrorist groups everywhere.
All right, well, the question is somewhat loaded because I don't believe that there was preemptive, whatever the terminology there was used. But I do concur with the significance of a hasty and lack of deliberate withdrawal so that the forces bent on evil in that land, in destroying it, in bringing about permanent conflict, let's say, between Shia and Sunni, will only be emboldened to turn that land into a firestorm. But there's something more significant than that, and that is the reputation of this country around the world. And Al-Qaeda will be able to boast that we never kept our word, we never carried it through, we didn't see it to its end, to its difficult end. And I think that that would be very unfortunate and cause significant repercussions around the world. We are there for just reasons. We will stay there for a long time in some degree of force to maintain law and order in that country, just as we've had troops in Korea for 50 years and troops elsewhere around the world to maintain peace. And I think that that's an obligation and an opportunity for the United States to spend and spread freedom and equality around the world. Are you timing or? Go ahead.
If we pull out now, will it hurt our reputation in the world? That's what I think the question was. A bit too late for that. After 9/11, I think we had the world The world looked at us as a leader as we climbed out of that situation. We have, whatever political capital we had is gone. I think the world, in large part, looks at us now as a warmongering nation imperialist. And the fact that we have troops in Korea 60 years later, in Japan 65 years later, I believe that's a shame. What right do we have, A, to even have been in Korea, but certainly in Japan, whatever they had, the issues with their imperialism ended at World War II. To the point, actually, in our occupation in Japan, there were no car bombings. There were no snipers we had almost 500,000 troops there at one time in Japan. And that was they were happy to be out of the war. So I think pulling out is the only option right now. Will Iraq be a mess? It's a mess today. And the people who tell us it will be a chaos are the very ones who told us it was going to be great going in there. So I think the people that are giving us advice now have been wrong about everything. And we probably shouldn't put too much faith in what those guys have to say. So pulling out will be damage. I think if we admitted that we were wrong, which we were, apologized to the Iraqis for all the people we killed and the destruction of their country, and in friendship offered to help them rebuild their country. I think that would send the world a message that, you know, we aren't too proud to admit we made a mistake. We made a mistake, and we did a bad thing. And how many people are dead? 60, 70, 80,000? I've heard numbers far above that. Our own 3,300 men and $500 billion of our federal money that we probably printed, most of it, and borrowed the rest. We're driving ourselves into a very deep hole economically and in the world's eyes that's going to take us many, many years to climb out of, I think.
Gary?
Does opposing the war give aid and comfort to the internal enemies of America?
Okay, how about if we switch the David go first, that way you get the benefit for 1 second. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Repeat the question one more time.
Does opposing the war give aid and comfort to the internal enemies of America?
Very interesting question. I'm going to spin that just slightly. People say, in regards to our boys in Iraq, well, they volunteered for the war. Oh, they did. Did they really? What did they volunteer for? It's important, again, to get beyond the slogans. What do they volunteer for? When you join the Army, particularly if you're an officer, you swear a very specific, very concise oath that says, I swear to defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And in the officer's case, it's the same oath that the congressional and senators give. I make this oath to protect the Constitution of a free will, and it says I'm not a nut job. I know what I'm saying, and I'll do what I say. And I say that because they defend us from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Our founders realized, yes, we have foreign enemies, but we also have a domestic enemy. And I believe our domestic enemy is the one who's attacking the Constitution today. And it's not Al-Qaeda. It's not bin Laden. It wasn't Saddam Hussein. It's not some poor Iraqi guy in his marketplace shop getting blown up to bits, okay? Our enemies, internal enemies, are the ones who've taken over our government, who've taken stolen our money and our wealth, created, printed, stolen wealth to the point right now, if you look at the federal government, 85% of every dollar the federal government spends has not even the remotest connection to the Constitution. So I would say pulling out of Iraq will embolden our enemies domestically. We've got to define who they are first. And I believe our domestic enemy would be, I think, terrified. If the people come together and realize the war's wrong, the Constitution forbids unjustified wars, I think our domestic enemies, and particularly if we can go back to the Constitution and say, Article 1, Section 8 mandates Congress to fund, regulate. They make the mission. I think it will terrify our enemies if we begin to get some backbone, call the rule book out and say, you broke the rules, you're going to jail. That'll scare them. So, different enemy that I think the question was asking about, but that's my perspective.
Well, the question was, does opposing the war give comfort to the enemy within? Sure, just as it would to any conflict that we would be engaged in. Whether it be, if we go back to World War II or the Korean War, and other struggles like that. But even more so, it gives encouragement to the enemy without, particularly the enemy that we are fighting in Iraq and in Afghanistan. It certainly emboldens them. For our U.S. Senator, who's the head of the Democratic Party in the Senate at the present time, to declare that the war is lost, as he did a couple weeks ago, gives tremendous encouragement to all of those seeking to kill American soldiers, to get us out of Iraq and out of Afghanistan. You could hardly think of something more encouraging to the enemy than to make such a declaration as that, when it isn't even the truth. The war has not been lost. But that certainly is one way to hasten it to that conclusion. I'm a little bit surprised that Dave talks about the enemy within as being ourselves. Do you realize what he said? He said that the enemy within is our government. Who is the government? That's you and me. We decide who is the government. We voted these people. And somehow they reflect the majority opinion of what you desire for our country. He virtually has equated you with the enemy within. That's a very troubling position. David referred to something else along the line that we're trying to destroy Iraq, and that oil is a chief motive of our being there and so forth. That cannot be said of Afghanistan. There's no oil in Afghanistan. There's no other country on the face of this earth that so selflessly gives of itself and of its people to die for other people.
Thank you. Carrie?
As a 19-year-old Christian soldier who has died in the horror of the Iraq War, what answer will you give to me when we meet in paradise and I ask you, for what objective did I give my life in its youth?
This will be Mr. DeYoung first.
Okay, so we're going to alternate. It is foundational to government that when soldiers go to war, they do so on behalf of the rest of us. We all assume collective responsibility for warfare and for anything else that happens within our country, so that when men and women die for our country abroad, they do so on our behalf, and we are responsible for their deaths. And it is a very sad, sad thing that that ever happens. But that happens to be the cost of what is just and fair in the world. Let's take the example of murder in a local society. If a murder occurs here in Scappoose, and the police seek to find the murderer and chase him down, and he turns around and shoots the policeman, that policeman was doing that for our benefit and on our behalf. And it's a sad, sad, terrible thing that the policeman got shot in pursuing justice. But it has to be done. And there's a cost to pay for our freedom and for equality and justice in our society. And that cost is often great, but it cannot be avoided. If we don't want to pay that cost, the only option is anarchy, and then no government and no country. And we can't extend the blessings of liberty and freedom around the world or in the local society of Scappoose. So soldiers are doing it for us, and it's part of the collective responsibility of all of us to know our way clear on this, and then in eternity to be grateful for those people who have paid the ultimate price to secure justice in our community or abroad.
This is a question I've pondered many times. My son is in a horrible position. He was rocket attacked last week. He had a mortar shell land 15 feet from him in Solder City a while back. It was a dud round. He said, "That's how close you are. 1 minute it's a dud, your buddy gets a live round. Sniper's a bad shot, you live. Good shot sniper, you're dead. I have pondered this. I mean, you can imagine the dread of thinking of the two uniformed officers with gloves at my front door with heads hanging down. What would I say? I don't know. I guess I couldn't even lie and say it was for a good cause. We are now at war today, in the year 2007, for the egos of our leaders. And yes, I believe many are our enemies. They have launched wars of aggression for decades. We have 500,000 American troops right now in different countries. Korea, Japan, Italy still, England still, Germany. We are what we would fear if our enemies had troops in Canada and Mexico and in the Caribbean, had carriers all over our coast. We would consider it an act of war. We do this, and we think it's all right because we're good and we're America. So that the question is, it would be a hard thing to look him in the eye and say, you died for a good cause. I say you died honorably. You went, you didn't chicken out, you could have gone AWOL, and I've told my son, if you ever went AWOL, I'd love you, I'd hide you, I'd pay your way. He said, no, Dad, I'm going to do it. So I'd say honor, and it's now moved into, he's got buddies in his platoon, and now it's about protecting his buddies. So we have launched a bad war, and to put nice sounding happiness around that is very difficult, and it's something I struggle with every single day, let me assure you.
Karen, we'll have two more questions, okay?
Okay.
And then we'll have a break after the closing statement. So next question, and then David will answer it first.
If it was Clinton who started the war, would you still support or oppose the war?
That's a great question. I submit to you, if Bill Clinton had done this, we wouldn't have been in there a year. Bill Clinton lied about we know what all, and he debated the wording of what the word is means, okay, and got impeached for it. And frankly, I had a great time. I loved watching it happen. To me, it was great sport to watch. I didn't like the guy. But here, George Bush goes on national TV, and the mushroom cloud, the flat out lies. We can't even now say he was misinformed. These are lies. They're still telling lies. They'll still mention 9/11 in the same breath of Iraq. These are people that are now lying to us. And if Bill Clinton when he went into, in fact, Bush got us into Somalia. Clinton got our guys killed there, and that lasted, a week? After the Black Hawk Down, we were gone. 18 guys dead. This is a lost cause. We are out of there. He went into Bosnia, and the right wing was against him for going into Bosnia. And there was arguably genocide going on between the Bosnians and Serbs or whatever. So I believe that if Bill Clinton had pulled a stunt like this, the conservatives would have got their backbones back, got their brains back on, and said, it's wrong, you're lying, Article 1, Section 8 says this, we're out, and we'd be gone. We've been gone right away. Certainly after the aircraft carrier landing, we said, okay, we're done, we did it. Mission accomplished. Even George Bush 1, who wasn't the brightest bulb on the planet, knew, get in there and get out, and 100 hours later, we're gone. And I think that was, what do they say, talent skips a generation? Whew, wow, we got that one figured out. No offense.
Would you repeat the question, please?
If it was Clinton who started the war, would you still support or oppose the war?
It doesn't make a difference who started the war. That is, whether it be Clinton or Bush or Jones or Smith. Let's remember the history of how we got into this war. David said some things that were pretty fast and loose with the truth, I think. First of all, virtually everybody in our government believed that there was a just cause for going to war. It wasn't a decision or a difference between liberalism or conservatism. It didn't make a difference who was president. It was the fact that everybody believed, and the whole Congress virtually voted this way, that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and that they were going to be used. There probably are weapons of mass destruction there, but certainly there were, without any doubt. He used them against Iran, Saddam Hussein did. A weapon of mass destruction. He killed tens of thousands of Iranians in the war back in the early 80s. He boasted of the fact that he had such. He refused the UN requests for flyovers over various parts of his country. Why were we doing that? To preserve the lives of the people in the north, so that he wouldn't exterminate them and commit genocide against them. Saddam Hussein murdered hundreds of thousands of people. And the run-up to that war was such that virtually everyone believed it was just at the time. Didn't make a difference who was president. I really am discouraged to hear David say that George Bush commits flat-out lies and that warmongering and such statements, they don't represent the factual truth as to the run-up to that war or how it's being conducted presently. To, within a certain degree of peace and freedom, pursue their own ends. And look at the amazing record that has happened. Never in their history before has Iraq ever had a democratically elected government. That's something significant. So the issue is what is presently happening in Iraq. And the schools that are being built, the infrastructure that is being built, is significantly going forward and will come to a completion given enough time. David said earlier that we ought to apologize to Iraq and we ought to offer to rebuild it. You know, that's terribly naive. Who's going to allow us to rebuild that country if it's being torn apart by genocide and internecine warfare between Shia and Sunnis? We're there to establish the peace. And when we're done with that job, we're not going to build their nation. We're going to allow them to choose their own destiny. We'll leave, but we'll probably maintain a presence in the area somewhere to help prevent the scourge of the earth who are bent on destroying and killing innocent people. Just as we're doing today in Turkey, Japan, Korea. Are we building those nations? No. We're preserving their right to exist so that they can choose their own destiny and their own direction. That's what we're there in Iraq for, after having defeated Saddam Hussein and gotten rid of his kind. And this is a battle that is going to go on for some time and is a serious struggle, and we should not give up.
I think it's important to go back to the beginning, which is why are we there? And we said we were there to protect ourselves and to prevent Saddam from using weapons of mass destruction. I find it quite ironic that we've now dropped about 100,000 tons of depleted uranium into Iraq with a half-life of about 4 billion years. We don't know what happens when a rocket that's using depleted uranium hits armor and explodes and vaporizes in the desert. So I think it's quite interesting. We used WMD in the attack to go attack WMD. It's just, I find it shockingly ironic. But back to the point, we were not sent in there to allow the Iraqis to pursue peaceful means of democracy. It's just not true. We were there for a reason the Congress authorized, put money into, defend security, and stop the WMD. That was it. When they realized that was a bogus operation, which it was, then we get into the protection, and now it's democracy and freedom, and it's the Middle East, and it morphed now to they've got to be able to defend themselves, so we've got to train the troops, and all this stuff. And it's like, where does this stuff come from? I mean, it boils down to men who've broken their oaths, who've broken the law, have attained places of power in this country, and they have drug us into an immoral, ungodly, unconstitutional war, and our kids are paying the price. As you and I sit here in Scappoose at the library, our kids are out there getting blown up. The guys shopping in Iraqi markets are getting blown up. And I'm not sure right now if they would be better off with Saddam Hussein. What right did we have to go in there and tell them who they're, if now we're saying it was to get rid of Saddam, what right did we have to tell them who the ruler should be? They've proven they can take care of themselves, if nothing else.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a tremendous thing to have you both just putting it out there and making a good effort.
Are we going to make a closing statement?
I believe we're going to have closing statements now.
Okay.
And Mr. Brownlow, you'll be the first to make a closing statement in 3 minutes. And then Mr. DeYoung. And I hope that you all will show them some generous applause and encouragement when they're done. We'll take a few minutes break. And I think that there may be one or more people from media here that want to speak with the two of you. So maybe just stay here for a couple of minutes. Sure. And then afterwards, anybody who's here will have an opportunity to make a statement or ask a question. So that'll be after the break. And David, 3 minutes.
Okay. I write some commentaries for a couple different websites, and my in-basket tends to get flooded with pro and con. One of the things that's is a trend in those who don't agree with me, well, if you hate America so much, why don't you just leave? Or move to Cuba or China or fill in your tyranny of choice. And I don't usually answer, but my first thought is, okay, let's see here now. So our country's overthrown by a bunch of warmongering cutthroats, and the solution is for me to leave, right? Brilliant, okay? I can safely say that 100 years of government education has succeeded beyond anybody's imagination of churning out an annual crop of fearful, obedient servants. And they would say, yes, you obey or you leave. I do love this country. I was, and part of the reason my son's in Iraq, I think because he grew up in a patriotic family. We voted, and we, as you know, politically we were involved, and I think that's expected of us as Americans. But I also think good discourse is very important, and what's been lacking in the church, I believe, is a good discourse. God's people sit in their government-licensed churches, their 501c bribery comes into place, and they don't want to ask hard questions. They say, well, we can't do political in church because we might lose a tax-exempt status. I'm like, forget the tax-exempt, guys. Get rid of that thing. It's killing us as a church. Excuse me for getting loud. But that we need critical thought, and yes, I probably sound harsh sometimes. I'm a little bit ticked off about this issue for personal and also but biblical and constitutional reasons. It disappoints me when God's people parrot out the same mindless propaganda, not speaking of Jim here, but I've been to church so many times when they parrot out the same little silly little slogans that were created by very smart people for the weak-minded. I'm a marketing guy, and I marvel. I take my hat off to these guys, and I say, brilliant. You've got people today, after what's happened, still saying, support our troops, and better to fight them. I mean, it's amazing. I marvel at it. So no, the answer is to not leave the country. The answer is to get involved, and if you haven't run for office yourself, get involved. Run for office. It gives you access to the media. You get the chance to speak in public. People listen to you more. I recommend everybody in this room, if you've not thought of running for office, do it. It's a good thing. In your church, bring discourse. Yes, you're going to get swiped at. Believe me, swiped at. But that's okay. And if you get out there and you put your name out there, my wife doesn't take it very well, but I think if they weren't saying things about us, that means they weren't paying attention, and we had no impact. So I believe that, you know, that little extra salt in the wound might be a good thing right about now. Might be a good thing.
We came here tonight to talk about the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And let me say by personal witness, I've traveled to Afghanistan twice, and one of the most significant conversations I had was when a man came up to me and a companion as we were walking down a street in a neighborhood, and he said, let me say something to you. And he did so with broken English, because most people do not know English in Afghanistan. And he said, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the fact that the Americans came here to deliver us from the Taliban. And polls have shown that 80-some%, 85, 87% of the Afghan people are grateful for delivering their country from the Taliban. I don't have the time to make a litany of all the terrible things that the Taliban did. But those people appreciate our freedom. Tonight we're talking about, is the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan a just war? I believe it meets the criteria as we've been talking about them. It is a just cause. It is with a just intent. And it is something that we will see through to a proper resolution. From what I hear tonight from the opponent, he basically is embracing a pacifist view, which basically finds all government, and particularly our government in this country, at fault. I think that the pacifist view is terribly naive when it comes to the nature of human beings and the purpose of government. You know, there are instances of abuse, instances of failure, instances of sidestepping, instances of needing to change course in every war. No one can anticipate, once the battle has begun, how the battle will take place. So just because there are missteps and miscues and mistakes made, that doesn't somehow impugn our total effort. Every war has to be reconfigured, readjusted as the battle goes on. But there is, again, no military in all the world that is so honorable as is our military. The people living in Kabul, Afghanistan, know what the Soviet Union did when its soldiers came into its country. And we're nothing like them. We can be proud of our military. The Bible gives authority to government to exercise judgment in its society. And in 1 Timothy 2, 1 and 2 in particular, it says that government should secure peace within and peace without. You can read it there in 1 Timothy 2, verses 1 and 2. What we're doing in Iraq is seeking to bring peace within that society and also to secure our peace from without, from attack from without, and those influences and forces that would seek to destroy America. So it is a very critical issue. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dave.
Good job.
Good job.
Take 5 minutes, it'll probably end up being 10, but let's try 5. Pick on you, and we have 1 minute. You have to hold those yellow and red cards up real high, okay, Rick? Okay, 1 minute, and somebody has something, first time, Bruce, I saw your hand up first.
I have a question. Do you equate Afghanistan and Iraq in the same bag? I noticed it was mentioned Afghanistan and Iraq. I hold them as very different causes for war. And I'm wondering if you put it in the same bailiwick because they're both unjust?
Who's going first?
I don't care which one.
Okay, so that's it, Bruce?
Yeah, I want to know if you put in both of them not justified, or both of them justified, or do you even differentiate between Afghanistan and Iraq?
Okay, now we're looking for very brief responses, gentlemen, Mr. DeYoung, Mr. Brownlow, 30 seconds each max. Okay, we're going to cover everybody's question and statement. Okay.
I'll answer that first. I believe they're both just causes, and therefore our effort there is justified. But they are two different kinds of conflicts. I agree with you in respect to that. But there are also very many similarities. And the issue of just cause can be articulated differently for each country, and the needs are different. But in either case, the consequences would be overwhelmingly terrible if we were to withdraw willy-nilly from either one.
If the Afghanistan government was involved in 9/11, then I would say there's a justification to have gone in there. The problem is the very people who say they were involved in 9/11 are the same guys who said Iraq had WMDs. So we can't believe much. Clearly, though, once we got in there and rooted out the Al-Qaeda, we're done in Afghanistan as well. Iraq never had a just cause.
Next, is it Sean?
Yeah, Sean. For both you guys, I've heard World War II brought up a couple of times. Are you guys aware of the Nazi influence after World War II in America with the corporations and all the stuff like that? That's what I was getting to earlier. I want to know what you guys think about all the corporations making all the money about this, how earlier the question was how we're supposed to be as a people proud, them saying us rebuilding Iraq. It's not us rebuilding anything. It's corporations. Halliburton's over there. Corporations are making record profit. I hope everybody in here knows this. Oil companies, a whole bunch of corporations are making major profit. I want to know what you guys thought about that. First, with the Nazi stuff. I want to know what you guys think about Nazis in our government right now.
Good, David.
Don't know about the Nazi. I think the spirit's there. I don't know about the Nazi brand. But certainly the military-industrial complex is something we should fear greatly. It was President Eisenhower's parting words to us. We have a very strong corporate influence, military-industrial complex. It's an enormous power in this country, and I believe add that to the Federal Reserve, the banker war. This is a banker war, corporate war, and I think not recognizing that is dangerous for our freedom, seriously.
I don't know anything about Nazi influence in our government. I think that's ridiculous.
Have you heard the name Werner von Braun?
Sean?
I'm just making sure it's the name.
I'm grateful that Werner von Braun decided to fight on our side and come to our side instead of the Soviet side after World War II so that he could build our space program and not the Soviet Union's. He got us to the moon, not Russia. Corporations are significant in rebuilding any country and the survival of any country. If you own a private small business, you are a corporation. I have one. I sell rhododendrons. Anybody who owns stock in any company in the United States ought to be grateful for what corporations do to build a society. It's simply business.
Gentlemen, we were created a constitutional republic. We, for the last 147 years, have been basically attacking everyone and sending our form of government wherever it is that we would like, whether it happens to be in the South through Reconstruction or Germany, Japan, you name it. And this has been called a war to spread democracy. Would you like to comment on why it is if we are a constitutional republic, we are exporting democracy throughout the world, in the words of our wonderful leader, George Bush?
We export democracy because we believe it's the best way for people to order their own country and government for themselves. We were the first democracy on the planet Earth, and over 200 years ago and through 200 years ago, we've proven that to be a successful form of government. It isn't perfect, it isn't the best that ideally could take place, but it seems the best one to work in our world as it exists today. And therefore, a democratic regime is considered to be less of a threat to anybody else on the face of the earth.
Memo to world. You will know your freedom is getting close when you hear the sound of our cluster bombs blowing up in your neighborhood. We haven't been very friendly about exporting democracy. Democracy being a 50.01% dictatorship or mob rule of the majority, I would say our government was based on the Constitution. If that was what we're exporting, I would say, got a shot at that. The mob rule of our day today is if 50% of voters vote this way, you get it whether it's against the law or not. And so I would say we're the last guys to export our current way of government. I think as it was set up, it was decent. It wasn't perfect by any stretch.
Depleted uranium has been used in the first Gulf War, it's been used in Kosovo, it's been used in Afghanistan, it's been used now in Iraq. And it has, like Dave said earlier, a half-life of 4.5 billion years. And I think that's a crime against humanity, and I think it's a war crime. And I would like to see Cheney, Bush, Rice, Rumsfeld all in prison for life. I want to know what you guys feel, how you feel about that. And Clinton also.
I think that Dick Cheney, and I would include Colin Powell in this because he was part of the deal, Bush and the whole crew ought to face a war crimes tribunal. Depleted uranium is just one facet, but you're right. We've sent a lot of very long-living nuclear waste in their country and aerosoled it in a way never before in mankind has anybody experimented in a part of the world with that much nuclear waste. So I think it's a war crime, and I think it should be investigated and punished by the appropriate means.
My reply is I don't know anything about that, and I would strenuously object to bringing anybody to war crimes trials on that basis.
Question, how different would Afghanistan and Iraq be if we had looked at 9/11 as a terrorist act, therefore an illegal act, and therefore we should have handled it as a crime instead of a war? Japan attacked us in Pearl Harbor, a nation attacked us. Here we had a group attack us, and we called it war. Was that right? Should we more likely call it a crime and put the FBI instead of our military after them?
Well, the reason that we call it a war is because they came from afar, a field. They're not within our country. And therefore, our military are the people that deal with foreign criminals. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference if we call it a crime or a war. It's rather an attack upon our sovereignty as a nation, unprovoked, and to preserve peace and justice, we needed to respond adequately, and that basically is what we've done.
It's a great question. Terror is a tactic used by weak opponents and disorganized, wandering bands of men. And I don't think we should treat it the way we treat a nation attack. I think that Japan and Germany or those type of direct attacks could be justified. But I think the terror tactic, I'm with you, a police action against the perpetrators is generally how to solve a crime. You don't carpet bomb a nation to hit a few of the bad guys.
Okay. Regardless of the reason why the war was started, if we could put that aside, the dam has already been breached, and America is now holding its hand in the breach and it's squirting out all over. If America were to withdraw this restraining influence, the whole country would be flooded in blood through sectarian violence, and America would incur some guilt for causing that situation to happen. How can you say that America should pull out if it's going to cause a worse situation to happen?
Who's first? You. That is a theory that I don't necessarily agree with. To say that our leaving would spill blood, again, those analysts telling us that are the same ones who've been consistently wrong every step of the way. It's already awash in blood. I think eventually we will leave. Whatever consequences are of that will at one time manifest. And I don't think delaying that inevitable day, because we will leave, it's just a question of time now, I don't believe that staying there is going to lessen the chances of that or make it any greater.
The United States has a history of going somewhere, delivering people from oppression, totalitarianism, and defeating that totalitarian state, and then staying on for a while to make sure that something like it doesn't come back. And I think that that's basically what we're involved in now. This is a unique conflict. Never in the history of our country have we ever been attacked by a people from without a state directly assigned to them or connected with them. So I think in a sense we're feeling our way. How do you deal with this? And we did win the battle to deliver Iraq from Saddam Hussein, but how to keep the peace, how to bring about peace. And it's not unparalleled with what happened in Germany after World War II. There was a significant number of months or years before real peace and stability could be assured to defeated Germany.
I was thinking, the war that we brought to Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm a history guy, so when I first think of that, I think of the Monroe Doctrine and the Thomas Jefferson, the war on Cuba, when we started bringing imperialism, or democracy rather, to other areas of the world. And James Monroe talked a lot about that in his doctrine that he brought forth. I was wondering how you felt the constitutional as well as the Christian aspects of that doctrine, bringing democracy to the areas of the world, bringing our type of government to like Cuba or Afghanistan. How you felt that would, if you felt that was our role, or if you felt that might be unconstitutional or against Christian doctrine in any way.
Well, I don't think it's against Christian doctrine, and I've already cited scripture, I guess, in regards to that. I don't think that we brought the war to anybody. The war came to us first, however we call it, a police action, war, terrorism, or whatever. And this is simply our response, and therefore justified. You know, Thomas Jefferson is often cited in regards to this and the Monroe Doctrine and so forth. Thomas Jefferson embarked upon preventive efforts when he brought to task the Barbary pirates in the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, from the shores of Tripoli, as the Marine song goes. And presidents all throughout our history have seen it necessary to do things preemptively to prevent greater evil.
The Korean War wasn't brought to us. The Vietnam War wasn't brought to us. Cuba, Grenada, down the list, Iraq, Afghanistan. These wars were wars we brought onto the world. And I don't think that's the right thing. Certainly it's not within the Constitution. Certainly our founders abhorred imperialism, internationalism. And to a man, they spoke against it. And I believe our Constitution is a document that limits the ability of our government to do that legally. And of course, that's routinely ignored. But
if we are in Iraq to help the Arabian people, then why at last count have 5,000 American citizen Arabians been locked up and taken away to secure facilities where no one knows they've been taken to?
I think the whole idea of Abu Ghraib, secret prisons, we've gone on to foreign soil, grab people off the streets with no evidence, trials, rumors, this guy did this, brought him back to Guantanamo or wherever. These are Geneva Convention violations, certainly from a moral standpoint. We had, and the problem is, again, the people who tell us these people are bad are not people we can believe. So to have these people in prisons and whatever, torture and foreign prisons, I think it's abhorrent to our freedom, it's abhorrent to the Constitution, and I think we should be ashamed. I think we should, as a nation, mourn what our government has done in our name.
I don't know anything about what you raised. Isn't it interesting, though, that once abuses such as Abu Ghraib occur and become known, that we do something about it, that we punish those who are responsible, and we seek to prevent that from ever happening again. If Saddam Hussein was still in control, you wouldn't hear anything like that. He tortured and put to death hundreds of thousands of people. And I think the record of the American military is generally good in regards to this.
You know, I kind of wrestled with a question in my own head as to whether you can export or foist freedom upon anyone. For example, in our own Revolutionary War, though we had some outside help, it was largely the colonists fighting for something they believed in, freedom from England, freedom from the oppressive government. And I think of exporting, I know they use the word democracy, but we were really supposed to be a republic, which is the rule of law and rule and elected officials. Can you foist cheap freedom on somebody? And I liken the term to cheap grace. Is it appreciated? Will it be maintained? Maybe it's almost like freedom welfare, I think, at the Americans' expense sometimes. Is this going to work?
Well, at least we're giving them a chance to find out. And nobody knows what the end result of this is going to be. It may well be that the democracy that issues forth in Afghanistan or in Iraq may not be anything like what we have here, but at least it will be a semblance of such, given the background of the people, given the history that they have, and so forth and so forth. But just think of this. Never before in their history have they had the opportunity to elect their own government. Isn't that something of an accomplishment?
What's the question again?
Can you foist
okay,
can you
right.
make somebody
Right.
be
Sorry.
free?
Well, of course not. I don't think you can do that. In fact, the Iraqis have shown their tenacity to overthrow people they don't want in their country. And I think that you made a point perfectly. When we threw out the British, we threw the British out with very limited resources. The Iraqis are soon to throw us out of their country with very limited resources. They've proven they're tenacious, they aren't afraid to die for their cause. And I don't believe in that case we're ever going to meet their mind and understand what drives them. So I don't think you can force freedom. And our version of freedom, I think, is quite twisted from what many would consider freedom. But so I think the answer would be no, and we shouldn't try to.
They're going to start the draft for women in 2008 for this war. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I don't know that to be the case, but certainly I think if we had a draft, which I don't support, but if we did, we wouldn't have our men there. The rich kids would have to go, the Congress's boys would be going there, and the world, it would have been gone. It'd be over. The reason we have it is because the draft is this quote voluntary thing I discussed earlier. But I think the draft is wrong to have one. I think we ought to force one on the people, though, to prove to them that you don't really want this war for your kids. You want it for other people's kids.
I know nothing about what you said. I would like to go on and say that I don't think it's a fair comparison to make between American revolutionaries bringing about the American Revolution and the American experiment in representative democracy and say that that's what's happening today in Iraq by their throwing America out. In fact, the end result of that is going to be a bloodbath, totalitarianism, and destruction from one end of the country to the other. That's not what happened as a result of our struggle for freedom in this country.
Do you think this war is like all these people, innocent women and children being killed and all soldiers, is particularly pleasing to God?
Well, no, because that violates, again, just war principles, that you should not involve non-combatants in the conflict. And again, the history of the United States in recent years is unprecedented in the world in seeking not to afflict casualties upon innocent men, women, and children. The problem is, we're engaged in a unique conflict that has never been before, our conflict, and that is that we are up against an enemy that does not dress as a soldier, that come from within homes and into communities, unidentified, and so forth and so forth. And so it's a difficult and terrible thing, and we go to great lengths to prevent harm to civilians, and we punish those who deliberately do so.
Our hairs are numbered on our heads. The sparrow falls, and God knows that. I think God is not pleased with what we've done, and I don't think that there's anything that we could biblically relate that it's a good thing happening here. So I do think God looks at it. It's bad.
I got a statement question, I guess. I don't agree with killing innocent women and children either, but it's biblical. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I have been doing some reading recently, and when God had the Israelites go into the Promised Land, it was not only men, but it was women, children, and even animals, and this was God's decree. Like I say, I don't agree with it, but there is precedent.
Okay. There's a statement.
How much do you think the government has benefited from 9/11? Do you think that they've benefited at all, as in positioning bases around the world or having an effect on adverse countries? Question to both of you.
Go to first.
Okay. The government benefit, I guess I wouldn't say the government benefited. I would say those who seek to enslave us have benefited. We now accept very intrusive things done to ourselves. Emails being read, phone records being tapped, phones being tapped, illegal wiretap searches, the NSA out of control, FBI admitting now they've broken so many laws. So I think that those who don't like freedom, I think, have greatly benefited from the 9/11, and we're willing to go to airports and watch our kids and wives be near strip searched. I think there was some things that happened that those who seek bad for us are pleased over. And I think that should cause us great concern.
Which country were you talking about? Our country, our government?
Yeah, our government benefiting as in, like, getting into Iraq, getting into Afghanistan.
As though somehow we've reaped...
Waging the war on terror.
You mean reaped financially benefits from doing such, or what do you mean? What kind of benefits?
Territorial.
Oh, I don't think we have any territorial gains or aims in Iraq, Afghanistan, anywhere else. Time will tell. If I'm proven to be a liar, give it enough time, and time will tell. But I can pretty much assure you that we're not there to gain any territory, to keep something for ourselves. We're trying to rebuild a country, and when we've done that, we will leave. And it'll be a better place than when we began. I've seen it firsthand in Afghanistan. They've never had a paved road that circles the entire country. United States corporations are helping to build that road, and it will bring security internally to that country.
I want to clear up too, we're not pacifists, because we believe in gun ownership. If someone would come into our house to do harm to our family, we would use guns, to hurt. I wouldn't go down the street looking for someone who might be doing harm and shoot at them. But my question to Jim is, I heard at our church, one of our missionaries in Afghanistan say that it's been very hard for them to convert, and they only were able to convert 3 in the last year or so. And they were told by one of the Afghanistan men that they didn't want Bush's religion. How can you justify the bombing of the villages? How can we help the Great Commission to go out to all the world and spread the gospel? That is as a Christian, my main commission. How can I justify that with bombing them and having them turn away from our religion? Because we're bombing them, we're killing our kids.
Well, first of all, the United States is not bombing villages.
Oh, yes, we are.
Secondly, the reason that only 3 converts, and I'm not sure where you heard that, but in any case, the only reason that 3 converts have responded to the gospel is not because of the United States. In fact, I would imagine that I could prove to you by statistics that there are more people that have embraced Christ from a Muslim background in the last 2 or 3 years than ever before in 1,300 years of history. Now, I heard it recently said that a woman in Pakistan said this: if that is the way that Islam treats women, I'm going to become a Christian. It isn't that a negative thing that the United States is in Afghanistan and Iraq. We are bringing Christian values there in an unprecedented way. And the result of that will be an increase of people coming to Christ, not a decrease. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that is happening in Afghanistan.
On my truck, I have a bumper sticker that says, "Freedom's precious metals, gold, silver, and lead." I believe in defense. I believe in strong defense. But this isn't like that, and I don't think that it's inducive. In fact, Jesus said to go out with only one tunic. I don't think he said go out with an armada of arms. So I think it hurts. I think our reputation in the world now is one of fear. And if I was not an American and living in a small country with oil, I'd be afraid right now. And I think we've earned that fear.
My question is for the good professor. And sir, I apologize. I was a couple minutes late, and the introduction had already occurred, and you had begun to speak, and I didn't catch your name.
Jim DeYoung.
Jim DeYoung. Sir, you spoke in terms of a just war, and I believe that you related that to the connection between Iraq's involvement and 9/11, which the administration that you're currently defending is denying that as we speak, by the way. But what if Iraq was involved in that, what is stopping them in nearly 6 years? Why haven't we had another terrorist attack here since then? I mean, certainly you can just walk across the border, for goodness sake. You could come in with a terrorist bomb. They could be bombing schools, malls, setting off dirty bombs. Why haven't we had an attack since then if Iraq was involved? Because it would be so easy to accomplish in this country today. Which, if I was running a war over there, that's exactly what I'd be doing, just coming in our back door.
I don't understand the question. Would you repeat that then?
Well, you made the correlation between Iraq's involvement in 9/11. And you said, well, the reason we need to be fighting them over there so we're not fighting them here. But what would stop them from coming over here on our back door, since it's so easy to get through our borders, because nobody would stop them. They could walk across at will, bomb at will. Look at the bombing they're doing, the truck bombs, the dirty bombs, and why wouldn't they be doing that here if Iraq was involved in that?
It's going to come.
Well, it's been almost 6 years and it hasn't happened yet.
Well, then we ought to be very grateful that it hasn't. And one of the reasons I think that it hasn't is because we're carrying the war over there against terrorism over there and around the world. Bali and Indonesia. PBS television had a wonderful expose of the difficulties in Indonesia, trying to keep a democracy there that only began in 1999, and the terrorists want to bring that down. Let me report what public television recorded that Osama bin Laden said. He said that he apologized to the United States for having masterminded the attack on 9/11 without giving us a fair warning and seeking to invite President Bush to become a Muslim. Well, he's done both of those things since. Now he's committed to killing 2 million American children and 10 million total Americans altogether. It's going to come because we are a very open country. But at least the struggle openly is going on in Iraq and Afghanistan today.
I too find it somewhat suspicious that Iraq hasn't come after us. And our being there implies they don't have maps of America to get here. I mean, they could find their way here. So why, I don't know why. But I certainly, it raises suspicions if this vast enemy I mean, as you mentioned, the malls, we have so many vulnerable places in this country. It wouldn't take much to almost shut down commerce. And I wonder, do they really want to kill us? I don't know, because it seems like it would be so easy, but who knows?
I'm purposely not calling on anybody twice, just to make sure everybody gets at least once. And Ron, I see your hand up.
Okay, to go along with his last statement about the terrorists in our own country, the Muslims are building mosques at a great rate, and from the information that I get, all it is a recruiting station to get them to believe in their religion, which is being taken advantage of by the terrorists to get our own people to turn against ourselves, as well as going into prisons and getting converts in there like you wouldn't believe. So they're trying to turn our own people against us. They wouldn't necessarily have to bring anybody into this country.
Okay. That's a statement, Ron?
Yeah, it's a statement.
Why aren't they drafting the president's son and the candidate's son already? I mean, I don't see anything different from them.
You mean, why are they not, why are his daughters not running?
Yeah, why are they not running making his son's term?
Okay, I can answer that one. I'll give these guys a break. We don't have a draft right now, although every 18-year-old and older needs to register in case we instituted one, but we don't have a draft right now. President Bush has daughters. So,
You got a couple of years.
good question, though.
Is everybody here aware of WTC number 7? Does everybody here know that on September 11th in New York, another building other than the towers fell to the ground completely at free fall speed?
Yes.
And I'd like for Mr. Jim up there to answer how that happens. The second part of that question is, are you not aware of us training misled Cuban terrorists in the Bay of Pigs in 1961-ish?
Okay, Sean? It's not that that's not a valid consideration, but it's just not relevant to our topic tonight.
What do you mean that's not relevant? If a building falls out of nowhere and we go to war, that's
I'll debate you on that one myself later.
We'll do it.
Anybody else? Yes, Carol.
Well, I do have a question because over there now, I think they questioned whether with their foresight that this could have happened, that there's a civil war. We're trying to police now the Shiites and the Sunnis who are killing each other, or that particularly the militant Shiites are taking people off of the street and there's a murder there. How are we going to solve this problem even if we leave or if we stay?
Who's first this time?
We're not. These people have reasons to hate each other that we will never understand. And to think we can go there and say, here's your vote, your buddies, it's pretty naive. I mean, this has been going on for a very long time, longer than we've been a country. And I don't think we know anything about what motivates these people to do what they do. I mean, to walk into a market and blow yourself up. They're different than we are. And to think we can magically throw them the thing we don't need to use anymore and say, here's your government, it wasn't very well thought out, that's for sure.
I think I would agree that I don't think our country foresaw the struggle that would go on between the Shia and the Sunni Muslims. And that's an unfortunate thing, but we've never entered into that kind of a conflict ever before in our history either. It isn't the fact that Iraq has come over here or not come over here. Iraq is not our enemy. It is the terrorists who are our enemy. And it is the extremists in Iraqi society that are our enemy. And I want to clarify something else that the other gentleman made a statement about. Islam is not the enemy. Muslims are not the enemy. It's fundamentalists Muslims. It's radical Islam. And that needs to be clearly differentiated. As a Christian committed to love your neighbor as yourself, that means all Muslims of the world too. But the terrorists who've chosen to put people to death, innocent people, and attack them, and to bring chaos to the world, the only thing that will prevent that from happening is the use of force. And how it will be resolved, I don't know. I think we can only hope that there will come to be some kind of a provisional peace, a provisional kind of tit for tat between the two great bodies of Islam, and they'll have a fledgling kind of elected democracy.
I was kind of opposed to the Iraqi war because, for one reason, I thought that it stopped Saddam Hussein from being a counterbalance to the Persians. Now we're in a situation of having knocked over that counterbalance and been in a place where, it having been a stupid war in my view to get into to begin with, now we will get out and we have the kind of loony Shiites and their lead country, the Persians, going out of its way to get an offensive nuclear warhead development system. What's the impact in both your views as to whether Persia is a threat to the United States with its nuclear delivery ambitions?
I don't know how that's going to be resolved, but I think this is still a better direction or trajectory than if Saddam were still there and he built nuclear weapons and the Iranians are building nuclear weapons and a nuclear war take place there between each other or together against Israel or the rest of the world. We are there at least to prevent that from happening from Iraq's standpoint, and we'll see what happens regarding Iran. But that is a tremendously difficult problem. It's a very, very sober issue.
I thought after they captured Saddam Hussein somewhat facetiously was, wow man, give him his job back. He was doing good for us. We had flyovers, we knew who he was, he kept Iran. You go back to the source of this Chalabi guy who was a CIA agent who got us all, he was an Iranian double agent. We had the Iranians feeding us, that's a fact. Chalabi was on the payroll of Iran. So we had the Iranians feeding us information. They couldn't take Saddam out. He killed 1 million of them, as Jim pointed out. They couldn't take him out. I would say, in one sense, we were recruited to do a job that the Iranians, the Shiite, couldn't do, and we did it. So yeah, we've gained nothing, and we've lost. But certainly from the Iranian standpoint, they've been emboldened, and who knows? I mean, we have disrupted the natural or unnatural order of things in that region, and I don't think any of us can sit here tonight and even hope to know what's going to happen, but it's got a good chance of being something we aren't going to like, I think, I fear.
Joe? Yes, sir.
I'm a little forgetful. Have I already called that name?
Yes, you have. Okay, if there's someone else to go.
Was there anybody else? Like we start double dipping, I'm afraid, you know. So, Jim.
I'm just wondering if either of you read the book Flags of Our Fathers or Flyboys that is now telling the story that's been confidential or secret about the American war effort in World War II. To me, this sort of puts the situation that you talked about, Jim, about just war into a new perspective. I mean, we have all of this coming out, the firebombing of Dresden, which was already public knowledge, but the bombing of Tokyo, the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, all these things brought an end to the war, which was good, but had nothing to do with just war principles. I mean, if we fought the just war the way St. Augustine would have liked to have seen it, we'd still be knocking on doors in Japan and Germany and saying, are you a Nazi, are you an imperialist? And millions of more Americans would be dying. I'm just not putting this all together. Can either of you address that from a biblical standpoint?
You understand his question?
Yes, sort of. I actually read a good part of Flyboys. It was a depressing book. That part of the history, our involvement in the Philippines, how many Filipino we killed over the years invading that country, the fact that we actually had bases in Japanese territory before World War II. This is stuff we don't hear about too much. So I think that was a consequence of our own outreach to the world, and its consequences were not good. And you can't say that Japan was justified to attack Pearl Harbor, but you can certainly say there was a lot leading up to it that we don't hear much about anymore. And our history in the Philippines is one of mass murder, and you can't even say anything good about why we were ever in the Philippines. We had nothing in there. And that book revealed, I thought, a shocking story that hasn't been told. It was a great story.
I haven't read either of those books. I think that history, both already that has transpired and which is yet to come, will not take the position that our effort in World War II was unjust. And in fact, I think that the criteria of the just war theory are met by our engagement in World War II, generally speaking. But where we began bombing civilians and declared total war, that violated the criteria. But that came about in order to bring an end to the war that would have seen many more killed and put to death than the effort that did take place. You know, again, I'll just rehearse what I said a moment ago, that once you start war, nobody knows what's going to entail and how that's going to be carried out. We can only pray and hope and work toward just criteria all the time. But frankly, just as a criminal may walk down the street. Well, let's take the example that happened a couple of weeks ago where somebody goes into a college classroom and starts killing 32 people. That was totally unexpected, unprecedented, and without belief that it could ever happen. And yet it did. And so just war criteria exist as an ideal to be met. And we endeavor to keep them. But human beings are not perfect. They are terribly faulty. And no one can understand or guide how they may or may not be met, those criteria. And unfortunately, sometimes they are violated. But I don't believe anybody would ever say that our efforts in World War II were unjust, or should say that anyway.
Well, I think maybe we can just be thankful for the opportunity to have this exchange tonight. Yes.